Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Bill O'Reilly.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by
We'll
Elm
do it
Valley
live.
Hotel.
Now let's dim the lights
during
and
cherry
start the
blossom
show.
season. Enjoy your stay at Elm Valley Hotel. And be sure to visit Dana during karaoke night. Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we are filmmakers who like to break apart film to analyze it and discover what we can about the movie-going process. Like, what's it take to make a film? What did they mean when they said this line? Does it tie in thematically? Does the camera work play in, in harmony with the themes of the film? So there's just a lot that we do, and all of this is coming from the perspective of us as filmmakers, actors, and obviously big nerds. That's part of what we do. And speaking of which, we're joined by a third big nerd. Welcome everybody, Clyde, to the show. Welcome, buddy.
Clyde.
Hey guys.
Man, super excited to have you. I've told the story a few times now, but you and Kei have your own podcast. Y'all have the This Is Us podcast. And now you have also Kei and Clyde, Great TV, Good Talk podcast, which originally started as pilot watching, where y'all just watched pilots and discussed them. Like during pilot season, there's like 1,000 pilots that get made, and y'all like to this has always amused me about y'all's viewing habits, and everyone has their own things they like to watch, but y'all have always been big on like not just watching pilots, but kind of analyzing and seeing, hey, is this going to have the legs to go? Do you hope this goes, or do you want to watch this again? What makes for a good pilot? And so y'all put out this podcast, and I was just seeing what y'all were doing and listening, and I was like, man, Todd, we got to do this. And so y'all were a pretty big part. There's some other, influences, but y'all played a major part of me believing, maybe we could do this too. So big props to that. But how are the podcasts going right now, man?
It's going great. I mean, we spent a lot of time on our This Is Us podcast. It's in its final season. And so, I mean, it's going strong. We've got an active kind of listener community who we like to engage with. And it's, it's bittersweet. Like, we're having a great time. But we also are aware that it's coming to an end. So we're kind of in that last ride. And I think that's going to be exciting for us to be able to do some different things and talk about different shows. And then I'm also doing a bunch of Star Trek stuff with a bunch of other like sci-fi nerds, where we're talking about all this Star Trek. So look, the podcasts are fun. I think the best part about it is you're just talking about what you be doing anyway, right? I just get to do it with a bunch of other TV nerds, with a bunch of other nerds who are listening. So it's great. We're nerding out over here. I'm having a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. So wow, yeah, you got like at least 3-4 podcasts going.
Something like that, yeah.
So once I didn't realize this was the final season of This Is Us. Are y'all going to keep that podcast active and or just let it sit there on the vine?
I think we're going to let it sit. We'll have to see what the community does, and then we have to decide whether or not we want to pick up a new show. I mean, that's really how it started. You talked about kind of pilot watching. It was one of those things where we were reviewing pilots. We were going to like TV festivals, and when we saw This Is Us, it was kind of like, this is amazing. And, Kei talks all the time about there are all these people talking, but nobody was talking together. And we kind of decided, well, let's jump in here. That way, one, we'll have fewer conversations saying the same thing. We'll just bring everybody together and say it once. And so we'll see if there's something else that really kind of sparks us in a way that says, let's commit to a show, to a podcast about it. So who knows?
Do you have a specific pilot that you're really excited about?
I don't know that I've
seen,
I don't know that I've seen anything lately that's blown my doors off and just been like, oh man, I got to talk about that. It happens from time to time. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I have to think about that with Todd. But yeah, there's every once in a while I get a pilot where I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. I don't know what it is yet.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky just because This Is Us is a network show, which has the benefit of running 15 to 25 episodes a year. And most of the like blown away shows, right? The great stuff is coming on premium subscription or one kind or another. And so those tend to run like 8 to 12 episodes max, and it's inconsistent. It's not like,
right,
you have this nice schedule that you can post an episode to. Instead, it's just like, oh, here's one shot. Do you just want to do like one episode or randomly break it up into 8? So like Ted Lasso, you and I and Todd are all huge fans of. I mean, that would make some sense to me, but I'm wondering, does the premium factor weigh into whether or not y'all decide to jump into something like that?
So, I mean, you're hitting on all the buttons, right? So one, when we look at it and we've tried a bunch of this stuff and like not aired it, but we've tried some binging. Like, so when you've got a streamer like Netflix or Amazon Prime that just releases everything at once, that's hard because people watch it at different times, right? So it's you can do an episode by episode, but by the time you get to the last episode, people have been done with that series, right? If it's good. And so that's one thing. And then you're right, the access. So truth be told, there was a big decision when we first started because we were like, we want to do an after show. Because pilot watching or great TV, great talk was cool because we'd pick what we want to, kind of like you guys. You'd talk about the pilot, you'd analyze it, and you'd recommend, hey, I think you should go check this out, or, look, wasn't for me. When we decided to do an after show, we were looking, and the 2 shows that we were looking at were This Is Us and Atlanta, right? And we loved Atlanta. The thing about Atlanta and why we ended up with This Is Us was access. Right, because Atlanta was on FX, it was a little harder to get to. It, and it also was probably a little intimidating because you really have to have chops to analyze some of the stuff that they're doing. And so we went with This Is Us because we said, look, it's going to be on network, it's going to be on NBC, everybody's going to have access to it. So we do think about that. I love Ted Lasso. That's probably my favorite show right now, like hands down. I don't want to say ever, but I love that show. I'd have to think long and hard if I wanted to do a podcast on it because I'm selfishly enjoying it for me. Right?
I totally get that.
But that being said, Apple's got some great stuff and some stuff that is thought-provoking and has enough meat where you can talk about it. The issue is how many people have Apple TV Plus? Right? Like I'm because I was talking to somebody just the other day and I was referencing The Morning Show. And there was a scene from The Morning Show that I was using as an analogy. And I was talking to someone. I was like, well, do you have Apple TV Plus? And I was like, I think I had it at one point because I bought a new phone. But I was like, so you probably haven't seen this. Right? Like I've just been watching The After Party. Right? Hilarious. Okay? But I'm still looking around and going like, who's got it? Or Swagger. Look, I can go like, I listen. Full disclosure. I used to work for Apple. I was very skeptical about this endeavor. Like, Apple getting into the TV making business, I'm not so sold on this.
Selling my shares.
I'm not going that far. Like, none of those. But I was kind of like, I don't know. This will be interesting. Let me see how it goes. And I got to come back and say and eat my words. I listen. I like what they've done. I don't love everything. I'm not watching all of their stuff because some of that stuff is a little too dark for me personally, but I can't say that it's not really well done and thoughtful, and they're putting out some really strong content. So I'd be interested in doing some of their stuff, but to your point, like, I don't know how many people have access to it, so it'd really be a passion project, right? So I'm doing it because I want to do it, and those are kind of the best projects, because as you guys know, to put on a good podcast is work. People don't understand how much work it is. So let me just pause and say kudos to you guys. Because, you talk about like kind of being nudged by us. Let me tell you, you have no idea how many times people have called us up and said, hey, I want to start a podcast. And we've spent some time talking them through, here's what you need to do. Here's the equipment you need. This is what you want to do. Podcast never, ever sees the light. Right? Mm-hmm. And so for you guys to not only do it, but to keep doing it is, man, hats off and congrats to you guys. Cause you love it, but it's work. Like, don't get it twisted. It's work.
Yeah. The benefit, of course, is like you said earlier, like we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't enjoy it. Like it's really nice to get on here and just talk with your best friend about a movie that you just watched, for better or worse, usually for better, but not always. And it makes it so much easier. And especially now that Todd is across the state and I don't get to see him as much, this is like a guaranteed way I can get some Todd time and just catch up, talk, shoot the breeze, and also maybe I can learn something. Just the back and forth is always really good and something I look forward to, especially during COVID times when human contact was at an all-time low. And I was like, man, I need something. I'm introverted, but even I have my limits.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Todd, what's kept you going? This is our 180th episode by the released. Oof. Yeah. So I'm curious, I didn't think you would hang on. I thought it would be me having to go recruit another co-host at some point, because Todd was just like, dude, I can't freaking keep this up. But I underestimated your battery. You have a much larger battery than I do, so that's on me and my myopia. But I'm just curious, like, what keeps you coming back doing this with me?
Yeah, well, one is I get my West time for sure, especially during COVID, just like you said. It was just really good to connect with somebody outside of my immediate family and do something that felt like a routine that was outside of the house. But we were doing this a couple of years before COVID. Yeah. So really it was the conversations that we had that it really made me fall in love with movies. Like, look, I've always enjoyed movies. I've always liked TV shows. I've always liked, that kind of entertainment, motion picture entertainment. I've always liked that. But I haven't really loved it until we did this. Does that make sense? So I've just learned so much from talking to somebody else, talking to you about these things, and that, about camera movements and how that changes how you feel a shot, right? I honestly never thought about that before this podcast. Not too much, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't really know why. Mm-hmm. And what a 35 millimeter would do, from far away or close up, or what an 85 would do, those kinds of things. And then acting in general. I mean, you're an actor, Wes. And so you pointing out a lot of things about, the way that she said this line really hit me. And I'm like, oh, it hit him. Why did it hit him? Oh, and then you explain it to me. And oh yes. Okay. I see it. And so I see that performance differently. And I think that this movie that we're about to review is a really great example of something that 4 years ago, I would not have seen in the same light. Watching this movie now after doing this podcast, 180 episodes, I can honestly say I could see this movie in a completely different way than I would have 4 or 5 years ago, for sure. Just in a movie making capacity, whether that's directing or acting or cinematography or whatever. So yeah, I think it was just that I started, after several episodes, and it was just an excuse to go see another movie, right? Give me a reason to go to Alamo any week, and I'll do that. Okay, tell me. Yeah. So then it was like, hey, to my wife, baby, I'm sorry, I've got to go to Alamo tonight. We've got a podcast tomorrow, and we're doing this movie. Can you just watch the kids? And it just became an excuse to get out, right? And then and now it's the same. It's like an excuse to sit down, especially when you have more responsibilities, you get older, and you have so many things you're trying to do in your life. No, I have this responsibility, not just as a thing that I do, but as a thing that I do with my best friend. I have just this responsibility to Wes to take this time to watch this film, to analyze it internally and then report back, So yeah, that's the long version of that answer, but there's more, but that's a good one.
Wow. That's dope, man. I appreciate that. And same, the number of times that, you come up with an insight that isn't thought out. You definitely come to every episode with your perspective, and I can see the internal analysis at work. But even as we're just hashing things out and you just drop like a nugget out of nowhere, I'm just like, oh God. Yeah. I can still recall moments, over the last 180 that I'm just still chewing on at night. Sometimes I'm like, God, where did that fucking come from?
But you know, the cool thing about that is that it's really based off of a conversation that we have, right?
Yeah.
Where like a lot of times I don't come into the conversation with that idea. You'll say something and it'll trigger a thought in my head, and I'll think, oh yeah, then because you said that, then I'm thinking this. Clyde, does that ever happen with you in your podcast, or do you come pretty, like scripted out?
So, I mean, listen, I'm a preparer, right? So I like to prepare. So I'll come to the podcast, especially This Is Us. The benefit of being on a podcast that you don't produce, like Star Trek, it's like candy. Like I watch an episode and I just show up and talk. It's playtime. I enjoy it. Like that's a different thing. But for This Is Us, where I'm also a producer, like I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to say, and how did, like, much like you guys are talking about, I'm going, well, how did this make me feel? And so I'm taking notes, and then on the rewatch, I'm looking back and trying to catch things. But the power of discussion, right? And so we do a YouTube live, a Facebook live session. And so we have listeners who are actually in our chats live with us as we podcast. Whoa. And so what happens is, Kei and I are having this discussion, and she'll say something. So one of the things that we do is in our show notes, we try really hard not to look at the other person's notes on what they're going to talk about. We may say, hey, what are the points that stand out to you? So very generally, we'll talk about this scene or this theme, but that's about it. That's just so that we both don't have the same area. But because I don't want to see what she's going to say. And that way, and the other thing that I do is that we have a lot of listener comments. And so listeners know they have about 48 hours. Sometimes, they may have about 3 or 4 days from when we've watched the episode to when we go live. One of the things that I do is I don't read any of the comments, because I'm experienced them live. And so when I look and somebody comes in and they say, well, I'm a veteran, and so this element that they're talking about hit me this way, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that. And then it starts to spark something in me. Or, we've got a character on the show who is blind. As it happens, one of our listeners is blind. And so she's constantly coming in and saying, that wouldn't work because of this, or, oh, I really like the way they portrayed this. And then I'm responding to it in the moment, and it changes how I see. There are times where I've come in and said, this is how I think on this. And by the end of the podcast, I've reversed field, because either my co-host or the listeners have said something that has given me new insight, new perspective, and changed the way I look at it. So I think that absolutely happens. Like when you're having this discussion, you're growing, and that's amazing, man.
Wow. Dude, I'm excited. Let's jump in. Todd, what are we covering today, man?
Yeah, today for our 180th episode, we're covering Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, from 1967. So if you haven't seen that, please pause this episode and go watch it. I believe it's streaming on Apple Plus, but also on Stars, if you have Stars as well.
For sure. We'll cover a bunch of things. Definitely, I want to look at some of the cinematography, the way they use highlights, and how they break the 180 rule. And I will define what that is for those who don't know. We'll also look at some of the story and writing, how they set the stakes, the heart of the real issue of the film, and what they're getting at, and also contextualizing art, right? This is 1967. Some of the language is certainly outdated, and it's worth having a discussion about what that means now in, post 2000. And of course, I'm really, the whole reason we're doing this episode is so that I can finally hear Clyde's thoughts. There's so many reasons, and I'll jump into that later. But yeah, we'll hear his thoughts and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A couple's attitudes are challenged when their daughter introduces them to her African-American fiancé. Directed by Stanley Kramer, written by William Rose, cinematography by Sam Leavitt, starring Sidney Poitier as John Prentice, Katherine Houghton as Joanna Drayton, Spencer Tracy as Matt Drayton, the dad, Katherine Hepburn as Christina Drayton, the mom, Isabel Sanford as Tillie, Cecil Kellaway as Monsignor, Beah Richards as Miss Prentice, and Roy Glenn as Mr. Prentice.
You listen to me. You say you don't want to tell me how to live my life. So what do you think you've been doing? You tell me what rights I've got or haven't got and what I owe to you for what you've done for me? Let me tell you something. I owe you nothing. If you carried that bag 1,000,000 miles, you did what you were supposed to do. Because you brought me into this world. And from that day, you owed me everything you could ever do for me, like I will owe my son if I ever have another. But you don't own me. You can't tell me when or where I'm out of line, or try to get me to live my life according to your rules. You don't even know what I am, Dad. You don't know who I am. You don't know how I feel, what I think. And if I try to explain it the rest of your life, you will never understand. You are 30 years older than I am. You and your whole lousy generation believes the way it was for you is the way it's got to be. And not until your whole generation has lain down and died will the dead weight of you be off our backs. You understand? You've got to get off my back. Dad, you're my father. I'm your son. I love you. I always have, and I always will. But you think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man.
So there's so many great little clips that I debated on pulling out of this movie. It was never a question I was going to use that clip, but there were just so many others that I wish I could use, like the one where Joanna and her mom are ironing, and she has this great little moment where, "Mom, did you ever experience such a thing?" She's like, "Oh, well, falling in love with your father didn't take as long as 20 minutes." 20 minutes. Which is a great little moment. And then we cut straight to them outside, John and the dad, and they're talking about the Watusi, and there's just there's so many great moments. And so but I'm really glad to be covering this, because I cannot tell you how many times this movie's come up in conversation with Clyde, and he's always had like 1,000 factoids, and usually he's the one that brings the movie up. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know that I've ever really heard how you feel about the movie itself. Like, I assume you like it, but I don't even know that for a fact, because you just have so many interesting things and that you know about the film, and the context of what's happening on just between cut and action, or between takes. And so, man, lay it out for me before you get to everything you know about the film. How you even is this a good movie to you?
Okay, so to give you some context, when Kei and I first started our pilot watching podcast, one of the things that we would always ask, kind of a running theme, we didn't start out this way, just kind of took a life of its own, was we were big fans of the TV show Lost, right? If you've seen TV show Lost, they have this Swan Station, this underground kind of bunker, and this was something where somebody would be down in the Swan Station forever, basically, right? So you got a limited amount of media. So kind of a running theme would be, is this something that you would bring into the Swan Station with you, right? What would be, if you could bring 10 movies, if you could bring 10 TV shows, what would you bring into your bunker, into your Swan Station?
The desert island,
right?
Idea.
Right. Here's the thing. We could have a long discussion about what you guys might bring, and I could have long philosophical discussion of what I might bring. This is the first choice on my list. Okay? So full disclosure, there's some things I love about the movie. There's some things I don't love about the movie. There's some things that I think are somewhat interesting and problematic, from a cultural standpoint. But this is probably one of my all-time favorite movies, period, end of statement. And Sidney Poitier is my favorite actor of all time. You talk about factoids. I got more because I happen to just, one of the things that you may know is that he passed away about a month ago. Yeah. Right before his 95th birthday, which is going to be February 20th, he passed away, which inspired me to read a second biography about him. So I'm in the middle of reading the second autobiography about him, and I'm just fascinated by him. So to answer your question in a word, Wes, yes, I love this movie.
What pulls you in about it? Like, what is it about the film that, speaks to you on such a, level that this is top pick, and you're just so in love with it? What's hitting you with this?
So I love what I call a good black and white joint, right? Like a good black and white film, a classic. It just feels a little quieter, calmer. We're not looking for special effects. It's not there's so much that it could have, but when you look at this age, it was really about the dialogue, the acting, the cinematography that was happening. And when I look at this, it's got such an interesting topic that I think is still relevant today. You've got some heavyweights, like some real, like Mount Rushmore of acting, like in this film. And also for me, some of it's a little bit nostalgia, right? So when I saw this movie, I stumbled across it. It wasn't like someone told me about it, which is those are the best movies to find, is that when you don't know anything about it, you just happen to be, hanging out on a Saturday afternoon, Turner Classic Movies is on, and you're like, what is this? That's what happened. And lo and behold, I'm looking at this African-American man who is playing a role very different than what you see often on cinema. And just, I loved it. Like it was someone that was so rich, so three-dimensional, the way he moved, the way he talked. The clip that you showed was him having conversation with his father, who he greatly respects and admires, but had to confront. Like, these are things that I was able to identify and go, wow. It's one of those moments where you look up on screen and you're like, man, I want to be like that when I grow up. That's what responds to me. And I thought that it would be dated. I thought that, the 17th time I watched this film, I would go like, okay, I see it's good, but no, like I probably didn't need to rewatch it before we took this podcast, but I did. And I'm watching it and going, and I immediately thought to myself, and I turned to my wife, I was like, how do you think my daughter needs to be before I can watch it with her? Like, I'm literally enjoying it moment by moment. Like I said, there's some things that I look over and go, I don't know about that. But I'm watching it, and it is watching history. It is a really thoughtful look at history. And then when I think about where we are, right, almost 60 years later, the topic of conversation and the views aren't that different. That to me, man, that's art. That's when 60 years later, and they're making really interesting arguments that will help you understand the world we live in today. That's art. So yeah, that's why this movie stands the test of time for me, is that it just holds up.
Yeah. Wow, Todd. So I have no idea. This is your first time. I assume this is your first time watching it. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But are you the odd man out on this one, or did this work for you?
Yeah. So this is the first time I've seen it, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I kind of knew what to expect. I knew what it was about, right? Well, in a broad sense, I knew what it was about, and I think it's about a lot more than that. Than what I initially thought. But so I was worried about going into it, and like, oh man, it's a timeless film. I hope I like it, right? I hope it's from the 60s. I really don't like movies made in the 60s. I'm sorry, I just don't. It's not it's not a time where I'm like, 60s and 70s, you could just throw them all away for me, like most of them. I just am not a fan. So I started watching this with the idea that I wasn't going to like it, and to be okay with that, right? I don't have to like it because it's a classic. And I got into it, and it started, and I thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to like this, right? Just not sure. Okay. Cause I'm getting ready. I'm, getting into the vibe. And plus I watched the colorized version, and I would recommend watching black and white. If I don't know how you feel about that, Clyde, but I feel like, I don't know. I wish I would have watched it black and white instead of the colorized version. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought so. Once they got to the house, and we saw Katherine Hepburn, immediately I was just like, oh my God, I was like melting. She's incredible. I mean, every line that she delivers feels like it was delivered yesterday, right? It feels like Joanna's performance feels very 60s to me. It's very like, I'm going to say this line because it is in the script exactly this way. And it doesn't feel like that for Katherine Hepburn, for Sidney Poitier, for Spencer Tracy,
yeah.
for all three of those. And Monsignor, I mean, everybody feels really, really amazing. Sidney Poitier puts on an absolute freaking clinic. I mean, I'm trying to think of another performance that, I mean, whether it's 50 years old or a year old, that I felt so enveloped in. And it's hard for me to do that. I know there are other performances that are amazing, and if you throw one at me, I'd probably be like, yeah, that's to par with his performance. But it was just incredible. And I looked, and Katherine Hepburn won an Academy Award for this, but I don't think that Sidney Poitier did. And I don't know who did he lose out to, because who the hell the same year could have done something better as a male actor? I really don't know. I almost don't even want to look, because it's probably going to piss me off. So I think, long story short, I went into it. I prepared myself to not like it, and it convinced me to love it about halfway into it. And I think they did it so well, and I'll stop here in just a second, but I just want to say the setup that they did for this, writing wise and story wise, was so fantastic. They made him the best human being a human being could be, right? You see these stories, and they made her parents liberal, pro the movement. It's not like, most of the times, I was talking to Jenny about this, my wife, most of the times you see these stories where, like, oh, they're told in the South, where it's just, this kind of thing is just impossible to happen, and it's a huge no matter what, and the family hates it and all that stuff. No, they taught her whole life, this is the way the world should be. And now that's being challenged, and they're trying to deal with that, and they're actually dealing with what they really think in their mind's eye, instead of what they're just preaching. That blew my mind. I've never seen, even since then, another movie that even remotely touched that. Where we're preaching this, this is right, this is true, and now we're being challenged on that, and we don't know how to respond to that. But being honest about it, right? It's not like I don't want to look ugly, so I'm going to say I'm okay with it, but really I'm internally, like, not okay with it. No, they were outwardly warring, right? He was talking to him, and maybe this is how they can get away with that in the 60s. I don't know. It'd be harder to do it now, but Spencer Tracy's character was talking to Sidney's character about how he's not okay with it, why he might not be okay with it, why, this is a problem, and why you're making a mistake. And he was saying all these things that were going against everything he had told his daughter her whole life. And he was being very honest as a character. Whether that was right or wrong is a moot point to that, but he was being very honest. And I thought that setup was so fantastic. And Sidney's character throughout the whole thing was so steadfast and real and honest and just amazing. And Joanna's character was so she didn't see color at all. She just was like you know, the world is how it should be, or should, you know, I know how the world should be. And so it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I'm gonna let somebody else talk for a minute.
I gotta say, so I'm gonna let you know he wasn't even nominated for this movie.
That's ridiculous.
But here's the thing: when you talk about how just the clinic that he put on, my favorite scene, like I love the movie. My favorite scene is when they are sitting out on the terrace, and it is Joanna, her mom, and Dr. Prentice. So Sidney, Katherine, and Katherine Houghton, they're all sitting out, and he's looking at the sandwich. I have never seen anybody pick apart a sandwich in a way that just compelled me. He doesn't even have to utter a line. It is the way he's watching and paying attention to this conversation that's going on about him and thinking about what he's going to do and how he's meticulously just observing and opening and closing this little sandwich that's been put on tray before him. Like, that was when I was like, what am I watching? This is amazing.
And she calls him on it like immediately,
yes.
Which really is just, Joanna's actually carrying a ton of weight on her back in this movie because she's the lifeblood. She's the energy. She's the heartbeat of their marriage and of their love, because he's so stoic and even keeled, and you can see him bubble over whenever he's with her. That stuff comes out. But ultimately, he's expecting the worst, and he's expecting that his heart's desire is not going to be fulfilled. And so we're really relying on Joanna to bring that energy and to bring that love. And they do so many things to sell that, like the eye lights, right? Basically, everyone has an eye light in their close-ups, but Joey has a lot of these catch lights, and it's just making her sparkle, especially early in the film, you know, and they're just giving her this sparkle in her eye, and it's life, it's love, it's that, you know, joie de vivre or whatever. Like, it's all there, and she has to carry that, you know, through her performance, which absolutely agree with you, Ty. Like, it's very 60s, especially in some of the subtler moments. But at the same time, you know, she has to carry a lot on her back because she's the youngest character in this film, being at 23, you know, playing a 23-year-old and someone who's naive about the world and she's so innocent and pure in her views. And like you were saying, her parents, right, taught her that love is love and people are people and we're all the same. There is no difference. And she believed it. That was her mistake in life, was believing that we could all possibly be equal. And she carries that with her everywhere with just such a perfect innocence. She kills me in that moment whenever, and I think that's such an important moment because she's carrying all this bubbly, you know, energy with her, but that moment specifically allowed her to demonstrate her intelligence, her emotional intelligence, because she's calling him out on what he's not doing and what he's trying to pretend isn't happening. And she just nails it so that we can also get an insight into the relationship and that she's not just blind and in love. Like, she actually has some understanding of who's next to her and the way he's acting and all the subtleties and nuances in his character. And it's just perfect. What a great little moment. And that I've watched it, I think 3 times now, over the last 2 days. And it just kills me because you're right. He is pulling the sandwich apart. He's staring at it and she's not even looking at him. She's carrying this conversation into her mom and just calls his bluff, like right there, without batting an eye. And it's so perfect. But for me, this movie works. I personally am I'm not huge on classics. Like, I've seen a small amount of classics. I wouldn't say a lot, but a fair amount. But what gets me are intimate small dramas. Like, you give me 2 to 5 characters that are kind of set in one main location, and I'm good. Like, I am riveted. It doesn't take much. Go listen to our Before trilogy. Like, I'm all about just 2 people sitting in a room having a conversation. Sunset Limited, you know, I thrive on that. Just good conversation. And Clyde, I think you're absolutely right, man. The writing, the dialogue, the performances, all shine. And then you throw a topic that I deeply care about, and I was smitten from probably about 8 to 10 minutes in. The first time I watched it in my mid-20s. probably off of one of your recommendations. Clyde keeps going on about this movie. All right, let's see. And it took all of 8 to 10 minutes. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. This is going.
So let me toss a quick factoid and say, before I watched this, I was a big Spencer Tracy, Katherine Hepburn film, right? So they've done, this is like their 9th movie together. So they, if you like rom-coms and stuff like that, you think about like, oh, I love it, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. This is them way before, and forgive me, acting ability taken up a couple notches. Like this is the couple. What's fascinating is Spencer Tracy is on his deathbed in this movie. He's so the concern for him is such an issue that they can't get the movie insured in case he dies in the middle, right? So the actors come together and pay for insurance out of their own pocket. And he dies shortly after the film. Like, that's how important it was to them to make this film. And so when you hear that, I go, well, if they could do all that to make it, I could at least watch it. And so, like, I was drawn in. Like, this is a movie that I'm often, when people go, what's your favorite movie? And I said, was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And I've gotten arguments about this meeting. I've gotten called names about this meeting. I mean, we can talk about that, but I go, this is a film that you should see, right? Like it, love it, hate it. I think you should see. I think it's an interesting film. It's worth talking about.
Can we ask about that then? What who calling you names or?
Okay. So early on, I moved to New York and had some friends from Texas who, decided to come. And so I had a friend who came by to visit. They took a trip to New York, had a friend to come by and visit, and she brought a friend of hers, right? A girl I had never met. And when they came by, she decided, I guess she was a professor of African American history at some junior college somewhere in Houston. She took a look at my movie collection, my DVD collection, and honestly, she called me an Uncle Tom when she saw I had Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So she, thinking I was stupid, had a really interesting conversation about why I wasn't. And I had to tell her a little something about herself because she felt like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner wasn't the right movie in my collection. And I think she advocated for like Jason's Lyric or something like that, which I have seen. And it's a fine film. Yeah. Sure. But that was the thing. Like she called me an Uncle Tom because she felt like this wasn't a movie that should be in the collection of someone representing the African diaspora. So really? I disagreed.
Good for you. I mean, you did say earlier that you feel there are some problematic elements on top of obviously the good nature of the tone of the film is a positive one, I would say. But I'm guessing like Tillie is probably modern day, brings up some issues, or I don't know, maybe other things. What are the things that kind of stick out to you that you're like, oh man, if I could make an edit, that might be the one?
So I love Tillie. I absolutely love Tillie. And the reason why I love Tillie is because Tillie shows that Black people aren't a homogenous culture, right? That Tillie's looking and she has a different viewpoint. And she's looking and she's worried about kind of her place and how she's going to be viewed. And there's a class issue within the African American community that this slightly touches on. So I actually love Tillie. My issue is as incredible. So it's a little bit of an issue and not an issue. As incredible as Sidney Poitier is and his character is, and just an inspiring person, did he have to be all of those things in order to be good enough to marry this woman? Right? Because what we see is not only is he a doctor, but he's a young doctor. He was, is on the World Health Organization. He was a professor at he went to Johns Hopkins, and yet the most prestigious places you could ever be, right? And
WHO.
He's built up to, yeah. He's such a person where you cannot find fault in him, right? Listen, I love it. His only fault is that he was married before and his wife and son died in a train accident. What would have been the problem if he had a few flaws to him, right? That was my only thing. For the sake of the story, I felt like they had to make him airtight.
Of course.
But if he wasn't, that doesn't make him any less valid of worthiness.
No, naturally. But I think this is where contextualizing art really helps, because this is in 1967 when this came out. When this came out, MLK had just been killed, right? They had to literally edit certain lines out in order to remove an MLK reference. And they ended up putting it back several months later. So it's still in the version that we're watching. Interracial marriage wasn't legal in all 50 states, as Mr. Prentice says to his son at one point. That would also change that same year. 1967 was a hell of a year, because that was when Loving v. Virginia would be decided in the Supreme Court. And the point, right, of having him be a flawless character is to make sure we can with absolute certainty pinpoint what the issue is in their relationship. And it has nothing to do with his character. It's everything to do what he looks like. And so, yeah, I think it's for the sake of the story and to, prove the point that they're trying to make in the 60s. It's absolutely mission critical, because otherwise, what you're going to have happen, of course, is any flaws whatsoever for a white audience would be expected to use that against him, right? And now this is a reasonable objection.
Yeah.
Well, of course he's not a good fit for her. Look how angry he gets, right? Or look how he treats his mom. Who knows, right? Any excuse becomes the right excuse, and it sucks because everything you said is absolutely true and absolutely right. Is any normal person that isn't broken would gladly nod their head to, right? But because of the context of when this came out and why it came out in the first place, which, to your point that you said at the beginning, it's a mixed, it's a failure. 55 years later, some of these conversations are still having to happen. That's a cultural, failure. And we'll definitely dive into that later on. But yeah, it sucks, but for the sake of the story, yeah.
I love that you said that, and to bring it around to the clip you played. I think that clip is that clip in particular. There's a few others. Obviously, there's several, but that one in particular is for me what made this movie so amazing, because I think it's because they finally give him a personality that is possibly flawed because he's yelling at his father, right? Possibly flawed, right? He yells at his father and he gets angry at his dad, and you probably have all these people watching it saying, "Oh, see, no, he's not good enough. He, whatever," and then he ends that whole thing with, "I love you. You are my father. I will always love you." But you are thinking this way and I'm thinking this way. It humanizes him so well. It takes you as a viewer down one path, as a 1967 viewer, 68 viewer, going down one path of thinking one thing and then it being pulled out from under you. Your ideal of oh, he's not perfect, being pulled out from under you, oh, he actually is. Because he's human, he has emotions. I've seen his emotions, and his emotions come from a good and loving place, even if they are anger. It's amazing.
And there's something else he says in that line real quick that is just absolutely true, because he's talking to his dad, but really he's talking to all of society whenever he says, it's not until you lay down and die before we can actually get forward. We can make progress and we can move ahead.
Wow.
And that applies universally. And one of the things that I worry about with extending our lives so long is we're not going to have as much churn that we need in order to get old, rotten ideas out of our tree, you know, and we can get some new roots that, you know, actually emblemize, you know, what we say we believe in. We're fighting, we die, and, you know, paint the blood of the American flag with, because those things can't really take root if all you keep doing is bringing your same shitty ideas back to the forefront. Yeah. Sorry, Clyde, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, okay, I agree with everything you're saying. Help me understand my least favorite scene in the movie. Okay.
Oh, I like this.
It's just simple. I love your thoughts. The doorbell rings. It's the butcher with the steaks. Dorothy comes out and they dance their way back into the truck.
That's 60s, man. That's the 60s. That's why I don't like the 60s movie. It's just,
I hate that scene every time I see it. I'm gonna be honest. I just want to fast forward, and this time I actually think I did fast forward.
I think it does a couple of things. Like, on the one hand, we get to see more kind of racial harmony, right? This black girl goes with this white kid, and, you know, we're seeing that. And it's also, I think, a bit of a comedic break, right? We're dealing with some pretty heavy content, and it's just like, let's take a minute, let's catch our breath. And they kind of have this beach blanket bingo moment, right, where they just are jazzing out in front of the house. But then it's also kind of a segue, because from that moment we jump into the backyard again, with Matt and John, and they're talking about the Watusi, and it's like, you know, look, and even Matt is saying, yeah, but the black kids, man, they're dancing much better than the white kids. And he's like, yeah, because we brought that dance. And it's, you know, I don't really care if anybody agrees or disagrees with that, but it's a fun conversation that they're having, an honest conversation about, you know, race and the differences. And you can see some geniality from Matt. You know, he's not over here trying to defend the great white race, right? He's a liberal, and he's objective. I think that's kind of the point that we're trying to get at in that moment, is he's being objective, and objectively, man, white people just aren't dancing quite as good.
Still.
But still, I agree. It's still a cringy moment.
Yeah. It's one of those moments where it's like, I don't, look, I love your explanation. That helps. I definitely, I'm hearing you as a filmmaker go, man, especially for 1967, we're hitting some pretty heavy notes. I feel like if that was made today, you keep hitting those notes without a break, right? Like, you just keep going through it until people are just laid out. Yeah. In 67, they wanted a comedic break, and they took it, so that makes sense to me. But I look and go, I didn't need it. Like, you could have just,
I didn't need it.
That, and listen, I know you got to give a little and love a little, but man, they got every dollar out of that song in that movie. I mean, how many times did we hear the movie? I mean, listen, I once sat in on a panel where a filmmaker was talking about how a lot of times music in a film or a TV show is super expensive. You can blow your whole budget. And so sometimes if you're going to spend it, you're going to make sure you get your dollar's worth. They're owed some money back on that one. Woo, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
That was
opens, closes, in betweens,
scene breaks, like background music, transitions. It's like everywhere.
About one license used it the whole time, but it reminded me. I couldn't help but think of like those wacky wavy inflatable tube man things, you know, that they have outside of car sales, of just like, you know, these things going like this. They were just going nuts, man. They were dancing like crazy.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll pop through a few notes real quick, and y'all jump in as makes you happy. As far as cinematography goes, like, they use a lot of wides, right? And this is very classic filmmaking, right? And so one of the cool things about wide shots like this is it lets the actors trample each other's lines. because in a wide shot, it plays easier. You don't need to cut back and forth between characters, because when you're doing that, you want to make sure no one jumps on your line so that you have a clean edit and post instead of dialogue that's jumbled up, because now you can do the pacing the way you want. If you want to wait longer between reactions, now you don't necessarily have to worry, well, we're already hearing them trample the dialogue, and therefore we need to keep continuity. So the pacing has to stay the same as the way we shot it. Whereas shooting wider and allowing people to trample each other's lines also makes it more available to the actors to be in the moment. This is what I'm feeling. Like, there's so many times when Spencer Tracy is just talking right over. He's just, yep. He's just kind of talking right over Katherine Hepburn. And I completely agree with both of y'all about her. My God, she carries a gravity and a weight that, every single word, even when she's smiling, you're just like, I'm not saying anything that you would be upset by. Like, you just frighten me and I'm enthralled all at the same time. I mean, everyone in here is just incredible, but she's definitely got something that no other actress had. I already mentioned the highlights, but breaking the 180 rule. So they do this at least a couple times that I think they do it, with very specific intention. And so if you don't know what the 180 rule is, think of it as the eye line between actors. So if you have, like, if we look down on a little coffee table, this round little coffee table, and maybe even set a compass on it, north, south, east, west. And we had two actors sitting at it across from each other on the north and the south end. Now your line would be them. And normally the way you operate your camera from this point is you're going to stay either on the east side and shoot everything from that side of the table. That way you're able to orient everybody, establishes the geography of the room, where the characters are, and it makes it so much easier for the viewer to digest the scene whenever you place them very consistently, right? And so it's just allowing everybody to have a good feel for where everything is at. And it on set, it also allows you to put a bunch of stuff behind the camera, right? That's where you hide your boom operator, maybe video villages back there so that your producers can watch and the director can watch, and then yell cut, with a big megaphone and scream at his actors, and then, do another take, make them all cry, whatever. And so having that 180 rule is very useful, as well as breaking it, because breaking the rule can make us feel a shift in the room. Because now, right, we're seeing new stuff. If you suddenly go from the east side of that table onto the west side of that table, now the background's changed, right? Now we're on a different shoulder than we were before on our actors if we're shooting these over the shoulder shots. And so there's a shift that can happen. And if you show it, if you show the camera crossing that line, you imagine, having a camera on the southeast side of a person sitting on that table, and now you just kind of walk across behind that character and move around to the other side of them. Now that character is breaking up the frame a little bit, and we can feel that shift in the room, and doing that can help represent a shift in the story. And just to point out a couple examples, they do this in this film, is when the dad catches on, right? Matt comes home and he's about to go play golf with Monsignor, and he's meeting John, and he's like, oh, yes, very good, blah, 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 blah. And he's not picking up on what everyone's throwing down. It's something that Joey says, I forget the exact comment, but it's like, yeah, there's so much more to discuss, isn't there, Mom? And she's like, yes. And he's like, okay, whatever. And he walks inside and he pauses, and then he slowly turns around, and then he walks outside. That's when we break the 180 rule, because now everything's changed. When before we had our backs to the bay, we were looking at the house. All the geography of that scene is happening as we're looking at the house and establishing everything there. From then on, most of that scene, it's not perfect, but most of that scene takes place with our back to the house. And now we're watching the bay. Now the trouble with that is 4 people at a table, presents a lot of things. But Clyde, what do you got?
Well, it's so interesting. So, I mean, this is why I love kind of listening to you guys, is because I hadn't really thought about that before. And now though something about that scene drew me in, and it's because you're right. We're looking. He comes in to the scene, and he's like, yeah, I got to get to this golf game. I got to get ready. And he starts to leave, and the camera follows him to watch him kind of come to this realization. He's literally in the middle of taking off his tie, getting ready to get in his golf clubs. And what I didn't notice was that as he turns around, we're now seeing his back, and we're now walking back into the scene with him. It was, you're actually right. It's amazing how they broke that. And it's a way that, to me, what I felt in that moment was, in the beginning of the moment, we know the secret that he doesn't know. And he's an outsider in that secret. And then it turned, now we're with him. And it almost as if we don't know what we know. And we're feeling him go, hold on a minute. What's happening? It's actually, now that you mention it, I hadn't thought about it like that. It's actually fairly brilliant, like the way that's done.
It's simple and completely effective because, yeah, we do take on his perspective from that moment on, as he's now about to finally get a clue. And I think he even says it, right? Like, I know I'm slow to catch on, but what's going on here? Speak plainly. And I love that. And then later on in the film, they break it again. And this is just as brilliant. With the way they do it. And so if you look at this moment when Christina and Matt, the parents, are getting ready, right? He's shaving, we're in the bathroom, and she's talking in his ear. He's trying to drink his whiskey and shave at the same time, which doesn't end up well for him. But they start the scene, the filmmakers, right? What is it, Stanley Garner? But they start the scene, and thank you, and by shooting into the mirror while they get cleaned up for dinner. And that establishes our line. And then about halfway into this conversation, as Christina is trying to lay something important on him, we pan over until we're now looking over his right shoulder. And that's when Christina has something to confess, which is, if he doesn't, this is going to break, Joey's heart, and I'm going to be on her side. You should know that now. I'm not going to do this to you in public, but you need to know that now in private. And breaking the line there brought a new perspective to Matt's understanding of his wife, and our understanding as well, because that's new information for us. We feel a shift in the story as well, because we really didn't know. We started to get a feel, right? Because she's evolved from her first reaction to now. And now that, and I love that. It's a brilliant use of a camera to establish and break the 180 rule, because the camera almost never moves. We just pan. You just swivel the head, and now you've managed to break the rule. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. I just think it's genius and simple in its storytelling. And it also allows us to never break, cuts. We don't have to break up at all. We just sit there and let them perform and do our best as filmmakers to not botch it, don't screw it up. I thought it was also interesting, and this is comical. This is part of like old filmmaking, that the car scenes, right? They're all in a studio and they just have a projector in the back, right? And they're probably, and I'm assuming these are just the old school, really huge cameras, very difficult to get into a car. And these cars aren't really cars, right? They've been cut in half so that, you can get all your lighting, and they have this perfect, massive lighting going on in their faces. And I think the French New Wave probably helped contribute to getting away and actually starting to get into cars. If you look at some of the French New Wave stuff that kicked off in the late 50s and started to make its way into America. It's hilarious to me watching some of these old films. I'm like, I lose it for a second, and then I'm back. I'm all right back. Like, it doesn't pull me off for too long, usually, but it's always going to tickle me. Going into some of the story and writing, the stakes, man, I love the stakes of this film. Dramas are hard, man. It's hard to, and usually for a romance, they take these easy routes. This is why most rom-coms fail abysmally with me personally. It's because the comedy isn't very good and the romance is very flimsy. It's all very fake, right? And we're just trying to root for these two people to get together because that's what we signed up for, not because we believe that they should be together. And so what they set up here is so much better, because the first thing we do is fall in love with them together, right? They're adorable. They're bubbling with excitement. And from there, we finally get to meet the parents. The parents run off to, Cloak and Dagger, right? The dad is over here making background checks, which as a newspaper man, I guess it's a 50-50 if he was white, if he would do that, but you have to think probably not. Like he's probably going to.
Oh no.
Right.
As a dad, I'm probably running the background check on every
care.
dude who comes in. I don't care if he's polka dotted.
100%, my friend. 100%.
All right, well,
I don't care what color you are. Or
that's so good.
Race or like sex, I don't care. I'm running background check.
I'm checking your Instagram, your Facebook. I don't
Google search.
LinkedIn.
Thank you. Let me see your computer. Open it up. Let's see what your search
Yeah. Let me see your browser history, bro.
I'm checking everything.
And what I love is that John walks in after they've had this whole conversation. I can't find a fault, right? He even paid for his long distance call, right? Because again, he knows he needs to be above reproach and give them no excuse. And so John walks in and he hands the power to the parents. I'm not going to marry her without your approval. Now we have stakes. The stakes before are, I hope my parents like us. The stakes now are, we cannot be together if they don't. That's amazing. That's huge. And so now we need the parents to approve of their marriage without any reservations, whatever, right? That's what they keep saying. Without their approval, this relationship will be canceled. We are heavily now invested in the parents' personal views being changed, because we can already feel that they're definitely not completely on board, but we don't even know if they're a little on board. And so we have a big emotional investment now in what they feel and how they think and how they view this relationship. And that's just genius for John to be written that way, to allow them to have such, a huge impact on the relationship. I think that's brilliant. And the way John brings it up is fantastic, because he is also doing it out of concern for Joanna. He loves her, and the last thing he wants to do is to upset her or make her feel like she has to choose him or her parents. That's not good for anybody. And so just incredible writing, I think. But all the characters are incredibly strong, rich characters. Joanna, that we've talked about, she's young, idealistic, naively frank in her language, and even the way they name her naming conventions, I think shows growth. She starts out being called Joey, right, and now she's Joanna, right, and I think that's a reflection of her maturity and her growth, and that her relationship with John is now defining her more than all the relationships that came before. All the family and friends are not having the same weight in her life as her relationship with John. And that just little reflection is happening in her name itself, right? When we're at the party, they call her Joey, and she's like, you know what? John calls me Joanna, and I think I like it. And they just immediately start calling her Joanna. That's John's influence, and that's his place in her life. Very freaking cool. Of course, John is older and experienced, right? Probably world weary. He's growing up in Jim Crow, drinking different water fountains, fighting. You can't even begin to imagine what it took to get into Johns Hopkins, like that, let alone everything else he's done in his life. Like that's, for me, unimaginable. And then mom, Christina, right? Very strong, very direct. She's very collected, very poised. And then you have the dad, Matt, right? He's bristly. He's thoughtful, but he's affable and he's loud. And he's a little all over the place. I love that he's so wishy-washy before he finally gets a ground for his footing, right? It takes him a while. And I love even the before and after of finding out their plans, because he meets John that's perfectly civil and entirely indifferent to his appearance. He's just like, this is just a human being. Hey, great. Yeah, no, nice to meet you. Oh, good. You'll be there at dinner. I get to hear all about what you're doing in Africa and whatever's going on in your life. And then he finds out who he really is, because what he does isn't really who he is to him anymore. And now you see that, you feel that change in him. And so the dad is a very strong character with points of view there. Same thing with Mr. Prentice, right? Very strong presence, speaks his mind very clearly, with a very strong point of view. Here's his son. The same thing with the before and after. Here's his son met a girl. And is incredibly happy to hear it until he meets her. Right? That's a big shift. And then Mrs. Prentice. Oh, I love her because she's such an antidote to every other one of our characters, because she's also idealistic. She's very soft-spoken, but she's very forthcoming and direct. And so the way she speaks is not reflective at all of, a timid nature, because to sit there and tell a guy you just met that you're old and burnt out and you don't remember what love is. You just walked in this dude's house and you laid him out. Like that's incredible.
A powerful man who runs a newspaper, right? Like I feel like we don't understand that power today, because we've lost really quite a bit of respect and understanding of what it means to run a newspaper in 1967. Effectively, she just said that to Rupert Murdoch, right? We're talking about someone who is the media and gets to craft the voice of San Francisco, right? They get to choose what goes in the paper, what the whether is it gonna lean left, is it gonna lean right, what are you gonna highlight, the stories, what are you gonna portray? And so this is an incredibly powerful man. He's going golfing with Monsignor. That means that he is connected politically, right, in one of the largest cities in the country, right? So when you have that type of conversation with him, like that carried a lot of weight that it's hard for us, I think, to understand in 2022 on what she just did, right? That's effectively, you just said that, sitting at maybe not Tim Cook's house, but you said something right there, and you didn't care. You were like, whatever happens, I'm putting it out there. It was bold. You're right. You wouldn't have expected from how she sat in that scene until she did it.
It's amazing. Like they wrote such incredible characters across the board, and that's one of the hardest thing to do as a writer, is to actually come up with compelling characters who have their own view and stakes in the world and their own way of presenting that. Like, you can't just have strong characters. How they present their world is just as important as what they believe within that world. And they just do an absolutely fantastic job of not just the writing, but the casting and the performances are all working in absolute, like, a freaking internal combustion engine. Like, it's just all firing really, really, really perfectly. And so that kind of brings us to the heart of the issue, right? There are plenty of reactions in people's faces. In fact, after the opening credits, the very first shot is a reaction shot. We open not on them, we open on a cabbie, and we see his face turn sour, right? And then we do a reverse shot. In his rearview mirror, what he's seeing is our couple kissing, which is so incredible, because romance films, what this technically isn't, I'll grant you this is a drama, but romance films usually end with a kiss. That's usually the final shot of a romance. They don't open with it. And so I think it's really fun for them to break convention, as this whole film tackles breaking norms. That's just a really smart way to open on our heroes, so to speak. And of course, there's so many reactions throughout the film, right? The cabbie, Hillary, the manager of the art gallery, Mom's face is pure dread when John enters the room. Her jaw drops. She can't blink. She can't barely move. You would think the T-Rex just walked in looking for a snack. Like, she is just a deer in headlights. And it's fantastic. But I think what all that stuff is pointing at is racism is rarely stated out loud. It's pernicious in that way. It's always going to be subtle. It's short of, lighting a bonfire in someone's front yard with a crucifix, which is few and far between. Though, of course, history's shown it does happen. but more often than not, the good people, right, who say they're not racist and then point to 1,000 reasons why they're not racist right before they don't want you dating their daughter. Like, it's all subtle. It's all in the reaction. And that's something that's probably harder to script. You can say it in a script, but now you're relying on the audience to pick up on a visual cue, and you're relying on your actor to deliver it in the first place. And then, of course, as we talked about earlier, the heart of the issue is not his character, right? We've gone through that. He's got an impeccable resume, which I think they had to build that flawless, to lay bare that the real issue, what it is, because even after learning all of that, they still had reservations because it's really not about his character. It's about his color. And the dad goes on to say that he's afraid for them, right? They're going to have a hard life. It's obfuscating his feelings using society as his scapegoat. That's what I believe. I think that's open to interpretation, but I think that would be the reality, is that he's using society's reaction to disguise his own. And now he can just point to society's the issue. I'm worried for you. I'm worried for my little girl. Please.
Well, I think that it is that. I think it's also a very natural fear, right? Because it is so easy to have these beliefs when they don't touch you and you have nothing to really lose, right? But as a parent, now you're talking about your children experiencing this pain. It's easy when you're talking about, hey, I believe in equality, when you're looking at other people shouldering the burden. But now when it comes into your home, it takes a certain amount of courage to stand up and say, okay. And I think that's what he was coming to terms with, is this fact that he was like, he kind of realized, I don't know that I'm that courageous. Like, I don't want my daughter to have to suffer, even if I believe what she's suffering for is right. Right. See, that becomes kind of a me thing. And what I love about this is all the things that he's saying, I don't disagree with him having those questions at all. Yeah. I don't look at him and go, well, he had those questions, so he's a racist. I go, no, these are the questions that you should have. You want to look and you want to ask, well, have you thought about what it's going to be like for your kids? You got to ask those questions because those are real questions, right? I think the problem is we won't ask those questions. We're too scared to say, hey, I'm curious about this. But what this movie gave us was he was able to very gently present these issues in a way that didn't say, you're doing this wrong, you can't do this because I know. He was saying, I don't know, and I'm worried. He was seeking understanding, and I think that's why this movie hits differently, right? Well, but you're absolutely right. Like he's looking and going. It's not so much like he's going. I don't think that he had as much of a problem as the problem was how that was going to show up in society, and society having a problem that now he's not comfortable with dealing with.
Yeah, and he even says as much, right? They'll both get their brains knocked in, right? And that's a very fair and real possibility. So I'm not completely discounting like his fears. I think that's a common argument for people who have an issue with this, with interracial marriage, seeing their kids with someone. I think he's giving voice to their concerns, while also I think most of those people are lying either to themselves or more likely to the person they're talking to, because really it's their discomfort that they have an issue with, even more, especially in modern times, right? If in the past 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you've had an issue with someone being interracially married, the issue isn't really, that you're worried what society is going to do to them. The issue is you, in my final analysis. Sorry, Todd, you want to jump in?
Oh, just saying, I agree with that. And I think that I don't think this movie is going to take someone who's far right and actually, in the 60s, take someone who's far right and turn them left. That's not the point of this. No. It's to take all those moderates to somewhat left leaning who think that they're left leaning, and really question them, and say, okay, really, what side are you on? You know, or not even what side you on. Let's address these concerns that we know that you probably have, even if you don't speak them out loud. We're going to speak them out loud on a screen so that you don't have to. We're going to address them so that you don't have to. We're going to ask these questions, make these statements that you probably think, if you have a daughter who brings home an African-American man, these are questions that you probably, even if you don't ask, you would want to ask. And we're going to ask these questions in the 60s. And allow you to live this out, you know, through this film, so that when you come out of it, you know that, okay, really what it is, do they love each other? Okay, they do love each other. And obviously love is not enough. You have to prepare them. You have to like make sure that they understand, okay, it's 1967. It's this kind of thing is legal in California. It's not legal everywhere. Okay, you're aware of this. Okay, you want to change this. Okay, you know it's going to be hard. You really do love each other. Go for it. You know, that's the kind of thing. It's talking to that section of viewer rather than, you know, the far right, who are just going to, you know, shit all over it anyway, no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that's the importance of art, is just showing, even on top of everything y'all are talking about, which is absolutely right in my opinion, but even just getting people comfortable with the visual of seeing an interracial couple. Like, art is so important with us progressing as you know, as a human race, and the ability to imagine and overcome old obstacles, old ideas. And sometimes you really just need to present and put a face on it and say, this is what that looks like. You know, start getting used to it. You're not happy about, you know, gay marriage. Well, maybe we need to see gay people kissing on TV so that you can start to get comfortable with these ideas. And because this is going to be, you know, in your coffee shop next. And so if you're not comfortable just watching it in the comfort of your own home, how can you ever be comfortable with it out in public, where it shouldn't even matter to you in the first place? And yet this is the way cultures kind of evolved and are needed to grow, because in the final analysis, as Matt says, right, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It only matters what they feel. Their love for each other reduces all other arguments immaterial. Don't matter. And talking about contextualizing the art of this film is really important to remember. This is 1967. So the language, I think, was different, right? They used old terminology, Negro, colored. And so figuring out context for me is hard here, because I didn't grow up in the 60s. Like, this is way, I would have had to have been born like 40 or 50 years earlier to really understand the context of this film. And I don't have those kinds of powers, unfortunately. But we should, I think, whenever you're watching a film with language that's different or ideas that are different, I think it behooves us to give a charitable view, especially given the good-natured ideas of the film itself. If you see a film that's trying to say a good thing and all you want to take away from it is a negative portrayal, I don't think that's a very charitable view of what someone's trying to accomplish, because the goals in 67 were slightly different than they are today. Unfortunately, not entirely different. And it's a shame that they could do a remake of this in the early 2000s and still have it play incredibly well. Like, it's still like, it still had something to say, like the remake, which I know you don't want to hear. Personally, that's one of the few I get with it. I guess I like Guess Who. That's probably,
and I love Bernie Mac, but I don't want to talk about that.
Bernie Mac, Zoe Saldana, man, I'm all day. I'm good. But this, you know, coming out in 67, it's important to remember whenever you're starting to figure out, you know, Tillie, you know, is she a necessary character? Is the way he talks to his dad necessary? Is the way maybe the most troubling for anyone watching this is actually Joanna. Whenever she keeps saying the word Negro, it can, you know, raise the hackles on the back of your neck, because you're just like, oh, Joanna, can you say anything else? Like, but I don't know. I'm just assuming the best here, that, you know, that's just part of the white terminology in that era. But
I will say, I think what helps is the cast, right? Like, it's one of those things where you're right. You do have to make sure you can't look at this with a 2022 lens. You just can't, because there's language, there are things that are just done there that were acceptable, the way they looked at things, or even some of the things they questioned. We've progressed a little bit, but you mentioned earlier in the show that this is the same year that MLK died, right? Malcolm X died shortly, a few years before this. When you think about some of the other movies that were going on at this time, it's oddly enough, another movie that Sidney Poitier was in the same year was In the Heat of the Night, right?
One Best Picture. Yeah.
One Best Picture. Very different tone. Right. And not for nothing, one Best Picture, and you're dealing with things like, we're not even at like the Archie Bunker stage. Right. So there's a lot of things coming. And I bring that up because you talk about Tillie. Right. It's easy to now look back and go, okay, I can understand that was Tillie, because I'm looking at Isabel Sanford. Right. I'm looking at Wheezy from the Jeffersons. So it's like this person who is, acting all crazy and is upset is later going to become one of the symbols of African American progress in media, in television, right? So it's like, okay, maybe it would have been tough then, but at least now I can looking back, it's like, well, okay, if Wheezy says it's okay, then it's got to, like, if she's like, I understand she's upset here, but she'll be all right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that helps. So kind of having history helps, right? Understanding who Sidney Poitier becomes, understanding, or I won't say becomes, who he has always been, right? Part of that is because I read a Variety article that upset me that said, one of the best things about this film, it was the first time that we see Sidney Poitier in a 3-dimensional role. And I'm like, really? Because Raisin and Sun came out 6 years before that, and pretty sure we saw all the elements and all the 3-dimensional elements that you needed to see in a character in that film. But I think that when you look, and you have to, as you mentioned, Wes, you have to look at this film and understand the world around it. That while it's relevant today, the history around it will really help you see it at its fullest. You can't get away from that. You can't ignore that.
You really can't. I guess final question for y'all, potentially, my final question anyway. And it's a simple one, but have y'all ever had this moment? Have y'all ever dated interracially and brought someone home that was a shock to the rinse?
I guess you'll ask that to me. I have not. Mm-hmm. It's not been for lack of trying. But I have not. I have had.
You also went to an all-boys school, so you.
Yeah, right. I didn't bring that home either. I have had some issues with my father. That, I mean, we're from the South, and surprising issues that have come up that have made me very uncomfortable, to the point where we don't speak, for long periods of time until, like, I don't know, I can get over it, or I can talk to him about it or whatever. But I've never, I haven't dated interracially, at least not African American.
Yeah.
I have, I don't know that it was that surprising. Because, I was born in Chicago, kind of lived there until I was about 9. When I moved to Texas, it really wasn't that surprising. I went to a predominantly white school. I don't think anybody was surprised, but it was, you bring someone home and there are questions. They are a little curious. I would say it was more funny for my cousin, Jarrell, who, he is black. He brought home a white woman who he loved and married, and very affectionately. I wish I could remember her name. I don't remember her name at the moment. It's been a while since I've talked to them, but the family just they nicknamed her, Snowflake almost immediately, and that just kind of became her nickname. But they loved it. Like it was one of those things like, what? And then it was immediate acceptance. So I've seen a lot of different kind of reactions. Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, people might think that this is such an old issue, but it's really not. I mean, Clyde and I, we have a mutual friend who, black dude, married a Mexican girl, and her parents cut him off. So it doesn't even have to be a black and white thing, right? There's all kinds of interracial issues all over the place. I've definitely had this issue. I didn't know it would be an issue. I was very much Joanna in that way. I was just completely oblivious because the man who raised me is Mexican, and so there wasn't a lot of racialized stuff happening in my house. And then my best friend growing up was black, and just countless, you couldn't separate us, right? We were just always at the hip. And then, my mom was best friends with his mom. And it wasn't until I was, I don't know, 17, I started dating a black girl, which I dated everyone. I literally didn't care. My one concern was
your standards were very
well,
whatever.
Are you cute? Cool. Do you like the music I
like?
like?
Are you breathing?
Right.
Let's do this.
Come on, as guys, it's do you like me?
Yeah.
Like
Thank you, Clyde.
That's
You've
kind of
yes.
like do you like me is kind of the key. Right?
Yeah, that's number
one. Are you
one
nice
on
to
the
me?
list.
Are you do
nice
I enjoy being around you? Like that's the basis, right?
Honesty is.
And
is
so I brought,
painfully
this girl
accurate.
home. I was dating this girl, and my mom, realized it. And it was very much one of these moments that you see in the scene, because I was on the phone with her. And mom it's tough for me to talk about some of this stuff because I love my mom and I love my family, despite, differences like this. And it's just part of loving someone. Right. And so my mom was also rarely home. She was newly divorced. And so she was gone a lot. And so one of these nights she was home and I'm on the phone, and she's asking who I'm talking to, and I point on my wall, and there's a picture of me and my girlfriend together, and I could see the change happen. Like her countenance dropped, and then within like 60 seconds, she was fussing at me to get off the phone. I exploded. It became this whole conversation that I just never would have anticipated. What I really did feel like Joanna in that moment of like, what's going on? I don't see, because, of who your best friend is, and, the way we've grown up is just completely different from people like you, the way you're acting like, right now. And I dated that same girl on and off throughout high school, and we went to prom together, both my junior, senior year. And those prom pictures never made the rounds. They are still in a box in my closet. And so whenever I go and visit family members, and I'll see, one of my brothers up there on the wall in his prom tux and his random date that no one knows who that is, and it's just like, oh yeah, my picture's never going to be up there because of who I chose to date and, love at the time. And so it's just crazy that growing up, you can never see it coming until it's happened. Right. And hopefully 2022, you would think it's gotten worse because of the way everything's gone in the last, 5-10 years. But I still have this naive Joanna hope that, yeah, we're all good, right? Like everything's good. I don't know. Hopefully. If not, watch a movie called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and reanalyze your life. Look at your face and see what's going on for real, because, in the final analysis, it's not what, someone looks like to you. It's really what you feel for them in the first place. So, yeah.
Couldn't have said it better.
That's good, Wes.
Short version. So,
yeah.
Nice. Any final thoughts, comments on this movie, gentlemen's?
I'll say something and I'll leave Clyde with the last word, I guess. I thought it was fantastic. The performances were great. For the only thing I wanted to add was Katherine Hepburn. I think there were two moments that won her the Oscar. The first moment was when she was looking at them, when she was in the study with her husband, and she was looking out the window and at Joanna, and saying how happy, that she'd never seen her so happy. that whole little speech there, I don't know, it was like 30 seconds, maybe a minute or something, but it was just, you could see it in her eyes. I mean, it's just, I mean, the highlights that they give that woman are amazing. It looks like she's constantly on the verge of crying. It's like amazing. The lighting is fantastic. That, and then the scene really for me, that stuck. It was like, oh my God, she's just so incredible. When she fired her studio director. Oh my God, bro. When she walked her out to the car. This is what I want you to do. And I've seen that in other movies. I've seen that done in other movies. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Da, da, da. But I think this might have been the first time that was done. Okay, I want you to write a check. And I want you to go cash that check because you don't work for me anymore. It was brilliant. It was so brilliant. And it did so many things. It told us she's on Joanna's side. And that, so we know, because at first we're like, how is she going to react? What kind of character is she going to be because of her reaction when she sees him for the first time? But then we find out, soon after that, whose side she's on. But then we really find out she's willing to go that extra mile of firing someone who's a jerk to him. She just met him. But yet she's going to fire this woman who's worked for her for years because of how she treats him. Okay, we know where she stands now, right? And then how she did it was just so fantastic. And to add to that, she walks in and doesn't say what she just did. She had the ability to tell him, I just fired that woman for being such a jerk to you. But she didn't. She didn't say, I did that because I'm on your side. She just let it be. She's like, yeah, she can be, what did she say? She said something like she could be a jerk sometimes. Not that, but she said, she called her like a bitch or something. I think she called her a bitch in the film, didn't she?
I think you're right.
I think she did. I remember my ears perked up. I was like, you just called her a bitch in 1967. Wow, is this rated R? What's up? Anyway, those two moments were fantastic for me. But Clyde, you can have the last.
Okay, Wes.
Let me jump one last thing because I probably should clean it up a little bit. For the record, like I've dated other women of color since then, and my mom's gotten along fabulous with everybody, and so I feel like she has come a long way. Yeah, I don't normally bring a lot of women home, just to be fair, but the minor times that it's happened, it's gone really well. So I think she's adjusted, much like Christina has adjusted in the same way, and so. Yes, please. I think it's
one more thing. I think it's important, for stories like your mom and my dad to also make the statement of, we know people who are less than what we hope that they would be in 2022 in regards to racial integration, right? Yeah. We're from the South. It's just going to happen. I'm sure, Clyde, plenty yourself. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make them 100% like they're just like bad people, right? Like they grow up in a certain way and that's just how they think things still are or still should be in certain times, and they change over time. Hopefully they change because we're different and because they integrate more and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Wes, and we're honest and open about that. And like my dad is a really, really wonderful human being. I know that your mom is too. She's amazing. It just, they fall short at sometimes, and it hurts us, in a lot of ways. So,
well said.
And I want to add to that, this film takes aim at race. And I do think that in 2022 is an important thing to consider. But Todd, to your point, I think the broader question is, what is your 1976 race issue, right? And it could be a number of things. And when we think about, Todd, earlier you said, take a look in the mirror. Like there are a number of topics that we can take a look in the mirror on. Is it your politics, right? Is it religion or spirituality? Is it gender issues? Is it sexual orientation? Like whatever it is, I think what this film tells us is, whatever you think you are, like ask yourself the hard questions. Like look at the mirror and examine, like if you're called to task on those things, where do you line up and can you grow? And I think what we see in this film in particular is it's one of those things that you have to ask yourself, do I know anyone? Right? Not what I've seen on television or read or seen in the movies, but do I know anyone? Have I taken an opportunity to get to know, and not just one, but a number of people, right? And because I think the thing that was interesting about this is when they got to know John Prentice, they're looking at him and going, hard or not, like, I like you. Like, I like what you're doing. I like what you're saying. I like who you are. I like who my daughter is around you. I like what your life is going to, like, what the possibilities for your life. Like, I like you. And I think that's the key, is that if there's someone that, if there's an issue that you're ready to die on a hill, my question to you is, who do you know? How much time have you spent in that community? Like, what do you know about those people before you put them in a box? And that was the thing. I think that in a larger sense was the thing that was interesting to me about this film. Is yes, I do, and again, I do think that race is something that we need to keep talking about, and I'm surprised that we have to keep talking about it, but it's not just race that we have to ask ourselves hard questions about.
Well said. So we'll move into the end of the show with recommendations. Todd, I'll let you go first, so just in case Clyde hasn't thought of anything yet. What are you going to recommend this week, Todd? Make it good, make it life changing, man.
I'm gonna recommend The Witcher. I've started watching it, season 2, and it's just I love Cavill. I think he's really strong in this role, and I liked the video game a lot, and I like what they're doing with the season. So yeah, I'm gonna recommend The Witcher.
Witcher season 2, nice. Clyde, you got something for me?
Yeah. Look, I'm going to go with TV because that's my home. There's a couple of things I could recommend from a film standpoint, but if you have not seen the TV show Grand Crew, check out Grand Crew. It's call it your Black History Month watching if you want, but it is a show about a group of kind of black men and one black woman, and they're in LA, kind of middle class, trying to figure it out. Like it's a comedy, it's fun, it's different. They're hanging out at wine bars, trying to figure out romance. It's a lot of fun. So if you get a chance, check out Grand Crew.
Nice.
It's available on Hulu.
Well done. I will check that out. I'm going to recommend a movie called Belle. So if you're looking for something that tackles race again, maybe even more historical, I'm having a hard time watching historical films about slavery, and I feel like I've got enough in the tank on that topic, and so it's hard for me to find a really good historical piece that deals with race in a new and fresh way. And I think Belle is that movie. I think it's absolutely fantastic and highly underrated because it tells a mostly true story. I think they take some liberties, but it stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who is absolutely phenomenal. And it breaks my heart that she's not a bigger star than she is because she's incredibly talented. It's also got Tom Wilkinson, who plays her dad. She plays someone who's mixed race, and what happens in society back in, I think it's the 1700s, in that era. And her sister, played by Sarah Gadon, who's also incredible. God, the cast, I think, is phenomenal in this film. And so it's both about, her and her place in society as, someone of mixed race, and as well as, it talks about slavery in, I forget what country we're in, probably, I'm guessing Britain, but not 100% sure. Yeah. And so it's a period piece. You get all these beautiful dresses, and it's inspired by a painting, a very real painting of these two sisters, one white and one black. I think the writer came across this painting and was just like, what is going on? Because you have this beautiful black woman and this beautiful white girl in this painting together. And there's really, even within the painting itself, there's some very interesting elements about the way they present their equality within the painting. And so it's an incredible film. I really love it. It's a romance as well as a drama. And if you can watch that in not at least drop a few tears, I would be surprised. But yeah, I think it's excellent film, worth watching. So Belle, Belle, as you would probably anticipate. Yeah, so stay tuned for next week when we lose Clyde. Unfortunately, we're going to be covering The Count of Monte Cristo, circa, I forget what that is, 2001, with Jim Caviezel. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen, and leave us a note if you want us to talk about something, about the kind of things you find interesting. Want to give a couple of shout outs. I discovered that we have followers on Castbox. I've never heard of Castbox, but it's a real thing. I'm pretty sure, unless I've been hacked again. It happens. And so, but we have a couple comments from some people on Castbox. Medea Sin, she commented, I'm guessing right after last year's episode on Wonder Woman 1984. She said the name Diana comes from the Roman goddess of the same name, which I'm pretty sure I had some jokes about the naming convention of Diana, which also shows my lack of understanding of Roman mythology. I'm much more on the Greek side. And so thank you, Medea Sin, for that correction. And another note from Release the Kraken, which is an incredibly insightful comment when he said, or she, I don't know if the Kraken is gender specific, but they said, I love this podcast, with an exclamation point. And so, well done, Release the Kraken. We shall release the Kraken. I disagree.
I 100% disagree.
Get it together, Release the Kraken.
Absolutely terrible podcast. But, you know, opinion.
Yeah, a dime a dozen. And if you want to leave a note on this episode and weigh in on the multitude of things we've said over the course of this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/guess who's coming to dinner.
And we'll leave you with a quote of the day from Martin Luther King Jr. In a truly integrated society, interracial marriage should be legal. This is not a true problem since individuals marry, not races. You know, this is one of the reasons why certain people are timeless is because they take a statement that you know to be true and they tell you in a way that you couldn't, that you don't expect, right? One of the reasons why Bono is one of the greatest lyricists for me is because he'll say something that I already know is true in a new way that I've never heard before. And this is a reason why Martin Luther King Jr. is just, you know, forever timeless. Like, that is like, duh. Yeah, obviously individuals marry, not races. But it's so easy to forget that because you just use your eyes and not, you know, to see things. So
absolutely. And it's such a time of the signs. For one, the reason I pulled him specifically was because he's invoked in the film at one point. And then I was just curious, like, did he ever speak about interracial marriage? And the sign of the times is right there in the quote, right? Interracial marriage should be legal. The fact that has to be stated is really, you know, puts you into perspective of what they were really dealing with. They're over here, you know, fighting for equality, and we can't even marry each other in certain parts of the country. That's insane that we would allow the state to have that much power over our lives, and it still persists. I mean, it's only within the last 10 years that, you know, we've allowed same-sex marriage. Like, that's insane. This is clearly not behind us, the idea of autonomy and looking at people as individuals instead of as blocks of people. Like Clyde said earlier, like, black people are not, you know, a monolith. White people are not a monolith. Stop seeing people as what they are a part of and start seeing them as themselves and as individuals. And I think that's really the only, you know, way forward, is to start seeing individuals instead of groups of people. Yeah. Clyde, thoughts?
Couldn't agree more.
No, I think you guys have covered it. I mean, I think as a society, we need to grow up a little bit. I'm encouraged that art, film, television in particular, are asking questions and pushing us to reconsider our ideals. I just hope that we can be thoughtful enough about our entertainment choices, what's going on. We can have discussions like this. We can be thought-provoking. challenging in a way that we grow, and not just, it's so easy with so much entertainment available to us. And we talk about, Matt being a leader of a newspaper. Today, we get to choose the news that we want based on how we feel and what we want to hear. Right. So we're in echo chambers today. And so I hope that films like this will continue to challenge us to get out of the echo chamber and ask ourselves the hard questions, whatever those questions will be. I am so thrilled that you guys asked me to be on this podcast with you. This has been a truly just outstanding time for me to talk about something that has been near and dear to my heart. I don't get a chance to talk about this very often, so thank you for that. And I appreciate hanging out with you guys for a couple hours.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for making time. I know I've from the beginning, from episode 1, I've had a list of people in my head that I wanted to have on the show, and you and Kei were obviously like right up there, top of my list. And so I'm glad. I think I only have 2 more people on my mental checklist, but it was really important. And so I threw it out to you whenever I saw you in LA, a couple months ago. I was like, hey, you should come on. What movie do you think you would want to cover? And because you didn't come up with anything, I was like, I already know then, like, this is game over. Like, but regardless, I'd love to have you back. We can pick.
Hey, let me know. I'm happy to come back. I love talking. I love talking, media. So yeah. I'm in.
Nice. Take us home, Todd.
Oh yeah, you already read. I guess you already read all the recommendations and everything. Okay. Did you say what we're doing next week?
The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, I guess we just kept talking so long. I forgot you did all that. Sheesh. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Clyde, for being with us, man. This is definitely up there, one of my favorite episodes. I just thought that this was such a great conversation, great movie. Thank you for making me watch it. I don't think I would have watched it had you not wanted to do this. So thank you very much, and thank you guys all for listening. I know it's been a long one, but hopefully you've gotten something out of it, like we have. And join us next week when we do Count of Monte Cristo. Can't wait for that. And make sure to subscribe, review us on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.